What if I told you that everything you've been taught about aging is fundamentally wrong? That the decline, the pain, the gradual disappearance of joy that so many accept as inevitable is actually optional? I know how that sounds, but stay with me until the end, because the final insight I'm going to share changed everything for me, and it might just change everything for you too. I spent 15 years studying longevity across 5 continents. I've interviewed centenarians in the blue zones, trained with Shaolin monks, including Master Shi Heng Yi, consulted with cutting-edge researchers, and experimented on myself. And I discovered something shocking. Aging isn't what you think it is. It's not a countdown to irrelevance. It's potentially your gateway to the most vital, fulfilled version of yourself, if you understand the code. Hidden pattern. Let me tell you about Wei. I met him at a monastery in the mountains of China, where he trained under Shi Heng Yi for decades. At 94, Wei moved with the fluidity of someone half his age. He woke before dawn, meditated for 2 hours, then practiced martial arts with people in their 20s. When I asked him his secret, he laughed and said something I'll never forget. "Young man, you Westerners think aging is something that happens to you. We know it's something you create with each choice, each day. This isn't spiritual poetry. This is reflected in hard scientific data. Harvard research shows that only about 25% of how we age is determined by genetics. The other 75%, that's lifestyle. That's choice. That's what I'm going to share with you today. The patterns I discovered weren't just about living longer. Anyone can extend a mediocre existence. This is about living with fire in your blood and clarity in your mind until your final day. About becoming more you as time passes, not less. The elders who mastered this didn't look like they were fighting aging. They seemed to be ripening, becoming more essential versions of themselves. The way a fruit doesn't fight to become sweet, it simply fulfills its nature through the right conditions. Forgotten wisdom. Before I share these 5 golden habits, you need to understand something fundamental. Your body isn't breaking down because of time. It's breaking down because of how you're moving through time. Modern life has created an environment radically different from what our bodies evolved in. We sit when we should move. We isolate when we should connect. We stay awake when we should sleep. We consume what we should avoid. And perhaps most damaging of all, we stress about aging itself, creating the very biochemical conditions that accelerate it. What the centenarians and masters like Shi Heng Yi taught me was that vitality in later years isn't about adding complicated routines or expensive supplements to counteract damage. It's about removing the obstacles to your body's natural genius for renewal. This isn't about denial or restriction. The most vibrant elders I met weren't living Spartan, joyless lives. They were deeply engaged with pleasure, purpose, and connection. They weren't running from death. They were walking confidently toward life. Essential foundation. Now, the 5 golden habits I'm about to share aren't quick fixes. They're transformative practices that, when embraced fully, create the conditions for what scientists now call compressed morbidity, where life remains vibrant until very near its end, and decline, when it comes, is swift rather than prolonged. These habits aren't separate techniques. They form an integrated approach. Each one amplifies the others. Miss one, and you diminish the power of them all. Master them together, and you create something greater than the sum of its parts. A life that doesn't fade, but deepens with time. Movement medicine. The first golden habit is what I call movement medicine. When I trained briefly at the monastery where Shi Heng Yi teaches, I noticed something fascinating. The elders there didn't exercise the way we think of it. They moved, continuously, fluidly, and with purpose throughout the day. Short bursts of intensity followed by rest. Movement integrated into every aspect of life. Modern research confirms what these traditions have known for millennia. A landmark study published in the Journal of Physiology showed that what destroys our bodies isn't age, it's sitting. Extended sedentary periods trigger a cascade of metabolic changes that accelerate cellular aging regardless of how much you exercise otherwise. But here's what's really interesting. The most impactful movement isn't necessarily the most intense. Harvard research on telomeres, those protective caps on your chromosomes that shorten with aging, shows that moderate, consistent movement throughout the day has a more profound anti-aging effect than occasional high-intensity workouts followed by prolonged sitting. Wei, the 94-year-old I mentioned, showed me his daily practice. He began each morning with what looked like painfully slow movement, a form of qigong that took him 40 minutes to complete what could physically be done in 5. Slowness creates awareness, he told me. Awareness creates precision. Precision creates efficiency, and efficiency creates longevity. I implemented this wisdom by breaking my day into movement pulses. Every 45 minutes, I stand and move deliberately for 5 minutes. I practice what Shi Heng Yi calls mindful mobility, conscious flowing movement that focuses on joints, fascia, and breath rather than muscles and sweat. The results were almost immediate. My chronic back pain disappeared within weeks. My energy stabilized throughout the day. My sleep deepened dramatically, and something subtle but profound happened to my mood. A kind of background anxiety I hadn't even recognized was constantly present simply dissolved. This isn't about punishment or discipline. It's about remembering that we're moving creatures in a culture that's forgotten how to move. Your body isn't designed to deteriorate while sitting. It's designed to thrive through motion. Nutritional rhythm. The second golden habit is nutritional rhythm. Notice I didn't say diet, because what I discovered across 5 continents wasn't about specific foods as much as it was about eating patterns. When you eat, how you eat, and the consciousness you bring to eating. In Okinawa, home to some of the world's longest-lived people, I learned about hara hachibu, eating until you're 80% full. In the Greek island of Ikaria, another longevity hotspot, I observed how meals were slow, social events that lasted hours. And in the monastery, I witnessed how the monks ate their largest meal before noon and their smallest in the evening. Modern studies on circadian biology now confirm the profound wisdom of these practices. Research published in Cell Metabolism demonstrates that confining eating to an 8 to 10 hour window each day, a practice now called time-restricted eating, triggers cellular cleaning mechanisms that remove damaged components and reduce inflammation, a primary driver of age-related decline. But timing is just one element. Quality is another. And here's where it gets interesting. The longest-lived populations don't follow a single dietary pattern. Some eat substantial amounts of fish, others are largely vegetarian, some consume dairy, others don't. But what they share is an emphasis on whole, unprocessed foods, with one fascinating common denominator: bitter foods. Dr. Walter Longo at the University of Southern California discovered that mild stress on a cellular level, like that created by bitter compounds in foods, activates longevity pathways. It's a phenomenon called hormesis. A little bit of challenge makes the system stronger. When I adopted this practice, I stopped counting calories or obsessing over macros. Instead, I established a daily eating window of 9 hours. I began each day with bitter foods, dark greens, fermented vegetables, or herbs like dandelion. I shifted my largest meal to earlier in the day, and perhaps most importantly, I transformed eating from a distracted, on-the-go necessity to a sacred pause. The changes were subtle at first, then profound. My energy became more stable. Cravings disappeared. My skin cleared. Digestive issues I'd had for years resolved themselves. And most surprisingly, my emotional relationship with food transformed. I stopped using it to numb or distract and started experiencing it as pure nourishment. Sacred sleep. The third golden habit is what I call sacred sleep. In our productivity-obsessed culture, sleep is treated as an inconvenient biological necessity, something to be minimized, hacked, or overcome. Nothing could be more damaging to your long-term vitality. When I visited the centenarian communities in Sardinia, Italy, I noticed something they all shared: an almost religious reverence for sleep. They didn't need studies to tell them what science has now confirmed: that during deep sleep, your brain clears out toxic waste through the glymphatic system. Your body produces key hormones that repair tissue and regulate metabolism, and your immune system recalibrates. Master Shi Heng Yi shared with me the ancient Shaolin perspective. Sleep is not passive. It is the most active healing you will ever experience. The monks practiced what they called sleep hygiene, centuries before it became a modern wellness term. They understood that how you prepare for sleep determines its quality. Dr. Matthew Walker, a sleep scientist at UC Berkeley, has shown that just one night of poor sleep can accelerate cellular aging and trigger inflammatory processes linked to every major age-related disease. Even more strikingly, research from the University of Chicago demonstrated that restricting sleep to 4 hours for just 1 week created pre-diabetic conditions in healthy young adults. The practice here isn't complicated, but it requires something rare in our society: the willingness to honor biological rhythms over social demands. I transformed my relationship with sleep by establishing a digital sunset, all screens off 90 minutes before bed. I created a sleep sanctuary, cool, dark, quiet, and free of electronics. And perhaps most powerfully, I began a brief evening ritual of gratitude and release, consciously letting go of the day's tensions before sleep. The impact was so dramatic it was almost disorienting. After years of believing I was just not a good sleeper, I began sleeping deeply through the night. Morning grogginess disappeared. My emotional resilience increased dramatically, and the chronic inflammation that had manifested as joint pain for years began to subside. Sleep isn't a luxury or a weakness. It's the foundation of resilience. It's when your body speaks most honestly to itself. Are you listening? Stress mastery. The fourth golden habit, and this may be the most crucial, is stress mastery. Let me be clear, stress itself isn't the problem. It's actually essential for growth, adaptation, and resilience. The real issue is chronic, unprocessed stress, the kind that never resolves, that hums in the background of modern life like white noise we've forgotten we're hearing. When I trained with Shi Heng Yi, I observed how the monks didn't avoid stress. They intentionally exposed themselves to it through cold exposure, fasting, demanding physical training, and meditation challenges. But they did so in a rhythmic way, with full recovery built into the process. The science on this is unequivocal. Chronic stress accelerates aging through multiple pathways. It shortens telomeres, increases inflammatory cytokines, disrupts hormone production, and impairs mitochondrial function. But short, intense stressors, followed by complete recovery, have the opposite effect. They strengthen cellular resilience through a process called mitohormesis. The key insight I gained wasn't about eliminating stress, it was about transforming my relationship with it. The most vibrant elders I met didn't have stress-free lives. They had stress-resilient nervous systems. I implemented this wisdom through a practice I call stress cycling, consciously engaging with challenge, then deliberately moving into recovery. Cold showers followed by warm relaxation. Intense focus followed by complete presence. Social engagement followed by solitude. And perhaps most transformatively, I developed a daily practice of what neuroscientists now call non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR, a form of conscious relaxation that triggers the parasympathetic nervous system and allows stress hormones to metabolize fully. The effects were profound. The anxiety that had been my constant companion for decades began to lose its grip. I found myself responding rather than reacting. Sleep deepened, digestion improved, and most noticeably, the constant sense of urgency, of never having enough time, began to dissolve into something more spacious. Stress mastery isn't about creating a perfect, challenge-free life. It's about developing the capacity to move through intensity with presence and to return to baseline afterward. It's about rhythm, not retreat. Purposeful connection. The fifth and final golden habit is purposeful connection. Of all the factors I studied, this one emerged as perhaps the most powerful predictor of vital longevity. Across every culture, those who aged most successfully were deeply embedded in webs of meaning, connected to others, to service, to something larger than themselves. In Okinawa, they call it ikigai, a reason to get up in the morning. In the blue zones of Costa Rica, researchers found that having a plan de vida, ya purpose plan, was associated with dramatically better health outcomes. And in the monastery, I observed how even the most ascetic monks maintained profound connections to their practice, to their community, to the transmission of wisdom. The science is clear. Social isolation is more damaging to health than obesity, smoking, or physical inactivity. A landmark study published in PLOS Medicine showed that strong social connections increase longevity by 50%, and research from Rush University demonstrated that having purpose in life reduced the risk of Alzheimer's by nearly 2.5 times, even in people who had developed the physical brain pathology associated with the disease. But here's what's fascinating. The quality of connection matters more than the quantity. Superficial social ties don't provide the same benefits as relationships characterized by depth, vulnerability, and reciprocity. And connection isn't just about people, it's about how deeply you engage with whatever matters to you. I implemented this wisdom by conducting what I called a relationship audit. I assessed which connections depleted me and which energized me. I reduced digital connections and prioritized in-person engagement. I found ways to share the knowledge I was gathering, transforming passive learning into active service. Most importantly, I reconnected with a sense of purpose larger than personal achievement or comfort. I asked myself the question I heard from a 103-year-old woman in Sardinia. Who would miss what only you can give if you were gone tomorrow? The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was undeniable. A subtle but persistent melancholy lifted. Physical resilience increased. I literally got sick less often. And most profoundly, the existential anxiety about aging itself began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet curiosity about what each stage of life might reveal. Integrated approach. Now, here's what's crucial to understand. These 5 habits don't exist in isolation. They form an integrated system. Each one amplifies the others. Movement improves sleep. Better sleep enhances stress resilience. Stress mastery improves nutritional choices. Better nutrition fuels purposeful connection. It's a virtuous cycle. This is why fragmented approaches to anti-aging fail so consistently. Taking a supplement while maintaining poor sleep habits, exercising intensely while remaining chronically stressed, following a strict diet while living without purpose. The body doesn't recognize these interventions as isolated variables. It experiences them as part of a unified whole. The elders who mastered vital aging weren't following a checklist. They were living in alignment with deeper principles: rhythm, awareness, connection, meaning. The habits were simply the external manifestation of an internal orientation. Practical implementation. So how do you begin? Not with dramatic overhauls that trigger resistance, but with small, consistent shifts that honor where you are now. Start with just one aspect of one habit. Perhaps it's introducing a 5-minute movement break every hour, or establishing a consistent sleep and wake time, or beginning meals with a moment of genuine gratitude. The key is consistency over intensity. The body responds more powerfully to regular, moderate signals than to occasional, extreme ones. This isn't about perfection, it's about pattern. And crucially, approach these changes not as deprivation but as reclamation. You're not giving up comfort, you're gaining vitality. You're not restricting pleasure, you're expanding capacity for joy. You're not adding burdensome practices, you're removing the obstacles to your natural state of aliveness. Profound transformation. Let me share what happened when I fully embraced these 5 habits. The changes weren't just physical, though those were remarkable. Increased energy, improved biomarkers, resolution of chronic issues I'd had for decades. The deeper transformation was in my relationship with aging itself. What had been a source of anxiety became a source of curiosity. What had felt like an inevitable decline became an invitation to continual growth and refinement. I stopped seeing my future self as a diminished version of my current self and began envisioning someone more essential, more distinctive, more fully expressed, not younger, but more alive. This shift isn't metaphorical. Neuropsychologists have shown that how we perceive aging actually affects how we age. A landmark study from Yale demonstrated that positive perceptions of aging added an average of 7.5 years to lifespan, more than not smoking, maintaining healthy weight, or exercising regularly. What if the most damaging belief about aging isn't about specific physical changes, but the assumption that decline in vitality is inevitable? What if our cultural narrative about aging is itself accelerating aging? Elder wisdom. Throughout human history until very recently, elders were revered not just for their experience, but for their embodied wisdom. a quality of presence that combined perspective, discernment, and compassionate detachment. In traditional cultures, including the Shaolin tradition where Shi Heng Yi teaches, elders weren't tolerated, they were treasured. They weren't seen as burdens to society, but as its stabilizing core. They held the long view in a culture prone to reactivity. They maintained equilibrium when younger generations were swept by enthusiasm or despair. What if the latter decades of life aren't meant to be a fading epilogue, but the period when we finally have the perspective, freedom, and self-knowledge to live most authentically? What if they're the chapters where the plot finally comes together and makes sense? The 5 habits I've shared aren't really about adding years to life, though they do. They're about adding life to years, about creating the conditions for a kind of aliveness that deepens rather than diminishes with time. Final revelation. And now, the insight I promised at the beginning, the one that changed everything for me. After all my research, after all my conversations with centenarians and masters like Shi Heng Yi, after all the data and practices and experiments, I realized something profound. Aging isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create with each choice, each day. But here's the deeper truth behind that statement. The goal isn't to avoid aging. It's to age magnificently, to ripen fully, to allow time to strip away everything inessential until what remains is purely, authentically you. The most vibrant elders I met weren't trying to look or feel 30. They had no interest in that diminished aim. They were becoming more fully themselves, more distinctive, more characterized, more essential with each passing year. What they demonstrated wasn't the absence of aging, but its fullest expression. The kind of aging that isn't a medical condition to be treated, but a profound developmental opportunity to be embraced. So I leave you with this question, the one that transformed my own relationship with time. What if the best version of yourself isn't behind you in youth, but ahead of you in wisdom? What if, properly understood and approached, aging isn't a process of loss, but one of distillation, of becoming more purely yourself? This isn't positive thinking, this is biology, this is neuroscience. This is the wisdom of traditions that have understood human development for millennia. And it's available to you right now, beginning with a single choice, a single habit, a single shift in perspective. The body you'll inhabit in your later years is being built by the choices you make today. The mind you'll possess is being shaped by what you attend to now. The relationships that will sustain you are being nurtured or neglected in this moment. Aging isn't your enemy. Unconsciousness is. Automaticity is. The assumption that decline is inevitable is. You have more power than you realize to determine not just how long you live, but how alive you feel at every stage. The 5 golden habits I've shared aren't complicated, but they are transformative. If you approach them not as techniques to master, but as alignments to embody. Movement that liberates, nutrition that energizes, sleep that rejuvenates, stress that strengthens, connection that enlivens. This isn't about fighting against time. It's about flowing with it consciously, using its current to carry you not toward diminishment, but toward your most essential self. Begin today, not with overwhelming change, but with a single conscious choice aligned with the future you want to create. Trust the process, honor the rhythm, embrace the journey. Because the secret that Shi Heng Yi and other masters know is this: vital aging isn't about adding something external. It's about allowing what's most authentic in you to fully express itself through the vessel of your life. Your most vibrant self isn't in your past. It's waiting to be lived.